The sky had been darkening all evening, the clouds heavy and low, pressing down on the town like a thick gray blanket. Rain began to fall softly at first, tapping against the windows of houses and the roofs of cars. But soon, the gentle drizzle turned into a steady downpour, rain pounding against the streets and creating small rivers along the curbs. The wind howled through the trees, bending branches and sending leaves swirling in the air. In the middle of all this, a small car was parked on the side of a nearly empty road. Inside, a little girl sat with her father, who slumped in the driver's seat. She could see that he was not moving, his head leaning back against the seat. Her heart raced. She had never felt this kind of fear before. She tried to shake him gently. "Daddy, are you okay?" she whispered, her voice trembling. There was no answer. Panic started to rise in her chest. She had learned a few things from school and from home about what to do in emergencies, but this was the first time she had to use that knowledge for real. The rain was beating down on the roof of the car, and through the windshield she could barely see the road ahead. Everything outside looked blurred and scary. Her father had always told her to stay calm in scary situations, but now that he was the one who needed help, she felt small and powerless. She took a deep breath and tried to think. She remembered hearing her father talk about calling for help when there was trouble. There was a number he had shown her once on his phone. Trembling, she reached over and picked it up, holding it with both hands. Her small fingers hovered over the screen, unsure at first. She had never called anyone by herself before. This felt like the most important moment of her life. After a deep breath, she pressed the numbers one by one. Her fingers were shaking so badly that she had to check twice. Finally, the phone rang. The sound was loud in the quiet of the car, echoing against the raindrops. She held it close to her ear, listening. Every ring seemed longer than the last. She could hear her own heartbeat thumping in her chest. She hoped someone would answer, that someone would understand she needed help. Far away in a tall office building, a man was sitting at his desk, working late. His office was quiet, the hum of computers and the faint sound of rain against the windows the only noises. He was reviewing papers, trying to finish up tasks before heading home. The phone rang on his desk and he picked it up automatically. On the other end, a small, trembling voice spoke. "Daddy, we're in the rain. Please come." The man froze for a moment. He could tell this was not a normal call. There was fear in the voice, and something about it made him alert immediately. He leaned forward, listening carefully. "Where are you? Can you tell me where you are?" he asked gently. He had to keep his voice calm, steady. He had no idea where she was, but he could tell she was scared, and that was the most important thing right now. The little girl wiped the rain from her eyes, trying to see through the windshield. "We're in the red car, near the big tree. The road is wet," she said, her voice quivering. She didn't know the exact street name, only what she could see around her. She tried to stay calm, repeating what she could see, hoping it would help the person on the other end understand. The man wrote down every word she said. He knew he had to act fast. The storm was getting worse, and he could hear the urgency in her voice. He asked her to stay on the line, to keep talking, while he tried to figure out the best way to get help. He instructed her to stay in the car, to keep the doors locked, and to make sure the lights were on so they could see her. She nodded, even though he couldn't see her, and promised to do exactly as he said. Outside, the rain poured harder, and the wind made the car shake. She clutched the phone tightly to her ear, whispering every little detail she could see. The curve in the road, the way the tree branches hung low, the puddles forming around the tires. Her father's breathing was shallow, and she tried to keep calm, telling him gently to stay awake even though she was scared herself. She stroked his hand and whispered comforting words, hoping it would help him hold on. The man on the other end of the line stayed with her the entire time, speaking softly, asking questions and giving instructions. He stayed calm even as he realized the danger they were in. He called the local emergency services from another phone, explaining the situation in detail. But when the dispatcher had trouble pinpointing the exact location, he realized he might have to do more. He remembered the roads from his childhood in that area, the twists and turns, the landmarks. He felt a surge of determination. He couldn't let the girl down. "I'm going to help you," he said. "I'm not far away. Stay on the line and don't hang up." His voice was steady, kind, and full of reassurance. The little girl held the phone tightly and nodded. Even though he couldn't see her, she felt a tiny spark of hope, a feeling she hadn't had since the storm started. Maybe someone could save them after all. Minutes felt like hours as the rain continued to fall, the storm showing no signs of slowing down. She kept talking to him, describing everything she could see while also trying to stay calm for her father. The man made mental notes, plotting a path through the flooded streets, remembering where the fallen trees were and which roads were likely blocked. He knew he had to get there quickly but safely. Every second counted. She whispered little details even when she wasn't sure they mattered. The man encouraged her, telling her that everything she said was helping. He spoke gently, asking about her father's breathing, reminding her to keep talking and stay awake. The girl felt like she wasn't alone anymore, like someone was right there with her. Even in the middle of the storm, the rain fell harder. The wind howled louder and she held the phone close, feeling the warmth of the man's voice through the line. She didn't know who he was, only that he was helping. For the first time since the storm began, she felt a sense of hope. She clutched her father's hand, listening to the instructions, trying her best to stay strong, because she knew someone was coming, someone who cared. The man checked in with emergency services again, giving them updates, making sure they were on their way, but he stayed on the line, not wanting the little girl to feel alone. He reassured her constantly, telling her she was doing a great job, that she was brave, that help was coming. Her small voice grew steadier with each word he spoke, and she began to believe that they could get through this night together. Outside, the storm raged on, lightning flashing across the sky and thunder rolling through the hills. But inside the car there was a lifeline, a connection that spanned miles. A little girl and a stranger, brought together by chance, working together to survive the night. Each word she spoke, each instruction he gave, built a bridge between fear and hope, between danger and safety. In the midst of the storm, with the rain lashing against the car and her father unresponsive, the little girl held on. She had found courage she didn't know she had, and the voice on the other end had given her strength. They were both waiting for the moment when help would arrive, both holding on to the fragile thread of hope that would guide them through the night. The man on the other end of the line kept speaking softly, carefully guiding the little girl through each moment. His calm voice was the only thing that cut through the roar of the storm outside. "Can you see anything around you? Any signs, buildings or lights?" he asked gently, and she leaned closer to the windshield, trying to make sense of the dark, blurred world outside. She squinted through the rain, pointing out the shapes she could see. A bent lamppost, a puddle that stretched across the road, a fence half hidden by shadows. She described everything, even the small details she thought might not matter. He listened, writing notes and piecing together a rough map in his mind. Each word she spoke helped him understand where she might be. It was like putting together a puzzle in the middle of a storm. The little girl's fingers were wet and cold as she gripped the phone. Her father's breathing had grown shallow, and she realized she had to keep him awake. She rubbed his arm and whispered words of encouragement, trying to sound braver than she felt. Every now and then, she would glance at the back seat where a small backpack rolled slightly in the rain, and she realized how alone they were. But she refused to let fear take over. The man instructed her to check her father's pulse and breathing, guiding her through it step by step. She did as he said, counting in her head, careful to be precise. Her small hands shook, but she kept going, listening to his voice and following his directions. He encouraged her gently, reminding her that she was doing a good job and that he would not let anything happen to them. As he listened, he realized just how much courage this little girl had. She had been thrown into a situation no child should ever face, yet she stayed on the line, speaking clearly, providing information, and taking care of her father. He felt a deep responsibility to get help to them, knowing that every second counted. He stayed on the phone while calling local emergency services again. He gave them the new details the girl had provided, trying to describe the area as clearly as possible. They tried to trace the call, but the storm and weak signal made it almost impossible. He realized he might have to find another way. He remembered the roads from his childhood and the landmarks she had mentioned. He mapped a path in his mind and prepared to go out into the storm to help her. The little girl kept talking, describing the sound of the rain hitting the roof, the occasional flash of lightning, and the rumble of thunder that shook the car. She tried to ignore her fear, repeating the instructions the man had given her. Keep the doors locked. Keep the lights on. Stay inside. Each instruction was a lifeline, something she could hold on to. She asked questions too about who he was and why he was helping. He answered gently without revealing too much, reassuring her that he was someone who wanted to help and that she was not alone. She repeated his words, trying to find comfort in them, feeling a tiny spark of hope that maybe they would be safe after all. Time passed slowly, each minute stretching longer than the last. The storm showed no signs of easing. Rain fell in thick sheets and the wind bent the trees until they groaned under the pressure. She could hear the occasional crack of thunder and the flash of lightning through the windshield. She held her father's hand tightly, whispering that help was coming, trying to stay brave for both of them. The man stayed patient, asking her to keep giving details about her surroundings. He asked her to look for any landmarks, houses with lights on, or signs by the road. She described what she saw, every small thing becoming an important clue. He repeated back the instructions, ensuring she stayed calm and alert. He encouraged her to take deep breaths, even though she was scared and cold. He also reminded her to keep her father talking, asking him questions she could repeat back to him. She did her best, coaxing him gently, hoping he would respond. Every small movement, every shallow breath mattered. She stayed focused, repeating instructions and listening to the man's calm, guiding voice. The little girl grew more tired as the storm continued. Her fingers ached from holding the phone. Her arms grew sore from rubbing her father's back, but she didn't let go. She had found strength she didn't know she had, relying on the voice on the other end of the line to guide her. She was no longer just a scared child. She was someone who was making a difference, keeping her father alive. The man, meanwhile, kept checking the weather, the roads, and calling for any available help. He remembered every turn, every curve in the area she had described, planning his way carefully. The storm was relentless, but his determination was stronger. He felt a bond forming with the little girl, even though he had never met her. She trusted him completely, and he could not let that trust break. She spoke of the rain, the wind, and the flicker of lightning. She described how the trees bent and how the road seemed to disappear under the water. The man guided her to adjust the car lights, to use the horn occasionally if needed, and to stay alert. She followed every instruction, her small voice clear and focused despite the chaos outside. He asked her to remember any unusual sounds, anything that might indicate danger. She listened carefully and reported back, describing each noise. The man took each detail seriously, piecing together a mental map. He realized that without her sharp observations, finding them in the storm would be nearly impossible. Her courage was not just admirable, it was life-saving. The little girl's voice began to grow stronger as she realized she had someone on her side. She repeated his instructions and added her own observations. She stayed awake, rubbing her father's arm, talking to him softly and listening for any signs of change. The storm raged outside, but inside the car there was a sense of purpose, a small light in the darkness. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, but the man never let the conversation falter. He reassured her constantly, keeping her engaged and focused. He asked questions, guided her actions, and celebrated each small success. Her courage and determination shone through every word, every action. They stayed connected by the phone, a lifeline in the storm. The man continued to make calls, checking with neighbors, emergency services, anyone who could help. But he also stayed on the line with her, understanding that her fear and isolation could be just as dangerous as the storm itself. He knew that keeping her calm and focused was as important as getting help. The little girl realized that she was not alone anymore. Even in the darkest, rain-soaked night, someone was there, listening, guiding, and caring. She repeated his instructions, answered his questions, and stayed strong. Her father's shallow breaths continued, but she held on, determined to keep him awake, to keep him safe. The storm showed no mercy, but neither did the man's determination. Every piece of information she gave, every instruction she followed, was a step closer to safety. She felt a growing trust in his voice, a bond that made the darkness a little less frightening. Together they faced the storm, one word at a time, one careful step at a time, hoping that soon help would arrive. The rain kept falling relentlessly, each drop striking the car like tiny hammers. The wind twisted around the vehicle, rattling the doors and windows. The little girl pressed herself closer to her father, keeping the phone to her ear, trying to block out the noise of the storm. Her fingers were numb, her hair plastered to her forehead, but she refused to let go. She had been holding the line with the man for what felt like hours, each minute stretching into an eternity. Every word from him was a thread of hope in the darkness. The man had begun making his way through the storm, driving carefully through the flooded streets, checking each turn and curve as he went. His phone stayed pressed to his ear, listening intently to every description the girl gave. He guided her to check for landmarks and obstacles, to notice any unusual sounds or movements outside. She complied, her small voice steadying as she realized she was an important part of the rescue. The girl noticed a fallen branch partially blocking the road ahead. She described it to him in detail, and he instructed her to turn the hazard lights on and keep the doors locked. She did as he said, heart pounding, imagining that the man could see her through the storm somehow. Even though they were miles apart, there was a strange connection, an understanding that both were fighting the same battle together. He instructed her to stay inside the car at all times and not open the doors, no matter what noises came from outside. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the soaked road and the water pooling around the tires. She could see her own reflection in the wet windshield, a small, determined face staring back at her. She pressed the phone to her ear again, repeating every instruction and observation, feeling the importance of her role. The girl kept checking her father's breathing, following the man's guidance closely. She counted every shallow breath, rubbed his back gently, and whispered for him to stay awake. She knew the storm was dangerous, but she also knew that staying calm and alert was their best chance at surviving the night. Each word she spoke to the man and each instruction she followed felt like a small victory. Meanwhile, the man had reached the outskirts of the area where the girl had described being. He drove slowly, scanning every red vehicle he could see. The wind and rain battered his car, but he refused to give up. He could hear the girl giving details, and they helped him narrow down the location. Every clue mattered. Every observation she shared was a piece of the puzzle he was trying to solve. The girl noticed that the water was rising slightly around the car tires. She told him immediately, and he instructed her to turn the wheels slightly to prevent the car from getting stuck in the deeper water. She followed his instructions, hands shaking but precise, understanding the gravity of each movement. She repeated back the instructions carefully, ensuring she followed every detail exactly. Time moved slowly. Thunder rolled overhead and the rain fell harder, drumming against the roof of the car. She felt tired, her body aching from holding the phone and supporting her father, but she stayed strong, keeping him awake, guiding him gently with her touch. The man's voice continued to provide comfort and direction, and she clung to it as a lifeline. He reassured her constantly, telling her she was doing an incredible job and that help was near. The girl kept giving more details about her surroundings, describing the shape of trees, the curve in the road, and the appearance of a fence that had been partially broken by the storm. The man wrote everything down, mentally mapping out the area as he drove through the flooded streets. He realized that the girl's careful observations were making the difference between finding them and not finding them at all. He felt a surge of determination to reach them safely. She also tried to keep her father talking, asking him questions that the man suggested. She repeated the man's instructions to him, telling him to take slow breaths, to squeeze her hand, and to respond when he could. Each response he gave brought a small wave of relief. She realized that keeping him awake and engaged was critical, and she focused all her energy on him while listening to the man's instructions. The man began to get closer, recognizing landmarks the girl had described. He could see the trees bending in the wind, the occasional flash of lightning revealing the flooded road. His headlights cut through the darkness, reflecting off the rain-soaked surfaces. He guided the girl to make noise, to honk the horn and flash the lights in intervals so they could locate each other in the storm. She followed these instructions carefully, feeling a flicker of hope for the first time in hours. The girl noticed a fallen tree blocking the road ahead. She described it in detail to the man, who calculated how close he might be. He instructed her to stay calm and keep the doors locked while he maneuvered closer. The little girl followed his guidance, her heart racing, feeling both fear and determination. She kept her father awake, whispering encouragement, telling him that someone was coming for them. As the man drew closer, the girl could see the faint glow of headlights in the distance through the curtain of rain. She shouted into the phone, describing the light and waving her hands, hoping it would help him find the exact location. The man's voice grew more urgent but calm, telling her exactly where to position the car and how to make herself visible. She obeyed, feeling a mix of relief and excitement. The long night of fear was starting to shift toward hope. The wind and rain showed no mercy, but the girl's determination never faltered. She stayed on the line, following every instruction, giving every observation and keeping her father engaged. The man guided her like a lighthouse in the storm, his voice cutting through the darkness, offering direction, reassurance, and hope. Together they faced the elements, each acting as the other's anchor in the chaos. Minutes passed like hours, but the girl remained vigilant, her small body tense with anticipation. She knew someone was out there getting closer, and she clung to that thought. She rubbed her father's arm, spoke softly, and repeated instructions without hesitation. Every word, every action was critical. Her courage and focus were the key to their survival, and she embraced it fully. Finally, through the sheets of rain and the echo of thunder, she heard the man's voice more clearly. "I'm close. Stay where you are, I can see you now." Her heart leapt, and she pressed the phone closer, listening intently. She followed his directions carefully, keeping the car lights flashing and honking when instructed. She felt a surge of hope and adrenaline, realizing that after hours of fear, help was truly within reach. The storm raged on, but the darkness had lifted slightly with the promise of rescue. She stayed brave, calm, and attentive, her small hands gripping the phone, her eyes scanning the rain-soaked road. Her father's breathing remained shallow, but she continued to whisper to him, encouraging him to stay awake. The man's voice guided every action, every movement, and every word. It was a delicate dance between fear and hope, chaos and control, darkness and the first glimmers of safety. The headlights grew closer, cutting through the sheets of rain that had made the night feel endless. The little girl's heart pounded as she held the phone tightly, listening to the man's voice guiding her. "Stay in the car. Keep the lights flashing. I'm almost there," he said calmly. She followed every instruction, her small hands trembling, but her determination stronger than ever. Her father's breathing was still shallow, and she kept rubbing his arm gently, whispering words of encouragement, telling him to stay awake. Every second felt like a lifetime, but she had learned from the man that staying calm and alert could make the difference between life and death. She kept her eyes on the faint glow of the approaching lights, hoping they were close enough to save them. The man navigated the flooded roads with care, headlights reflecting off the water and the fallen branches scattered along the roadside. He had memorized the girl's descriptions, the shape of the trees, the curve in the road, and the way the fence leaned. Each piece of information helped him inch closer, and he spoke over the phone, giving her precise directions. "Turn the wheel slightly to the left, flash the lights once, honk twice," he instructed. She obeyed, heart racing, the sound of the horn echoing in the storm. The girl noticed a large branch lying across the road, closer than before. She described it to him immediately, and he calculated how to navigate around it without causing harm. He guided her to ensure the car remained stable and secure while he approached. She followed each step exactly as he instructed, realizing that every word mattered now more than ever. Thunder rolled overhead, shaking the car, but she kept her focus. Her father stirred slightly, and she whispered to him gently, telling him that someone was here to help. She checked his pulse and breathing as instructed, relieved to find small signs of improvement. She kept speaking to him, repeating the man's words and following his directions, feeling a tiny spark of hope in the darkness. The man's headlights finally illuminated the car clearly. He slowed down and parked nearby, the rain drenching him instantly. He called out gently, making sure the little girl could hear him over the storm. "I'm here. Stay calm, I'm going to help you now." Her eyes widened, and she felt a wave of relief wash over her. She could see him moving carefully toward the car, every step deliberate to avoid slipping or losing balance in the flooded area. She guided him verbally as he approached, describing the car's exact location and the obstacles around it. The man nodded, speaking soothing words to reassure her, telling her everything was going to be okay. He moved with purpose, balancing the need for speed with caution, knowing the storm was relentless and every second counted. The girl's hands were cold and wet as she opened the car door slightly when instructed, making sure her father remained safe inside. She helped the man check the seatbelt and the doors, following his guidance carefully. Her small hands trembled, but she was determined to do everything perfectly. Her father's shallow breaths encouraged her to continue, and she whispered to him, telling him that someone had come to save them. The man worked quickly, assessing the best way to get the father out of the car safely. He guided the girl to help steady him, keeping both of them safe from the rising water and fallen debris. Lightning flashed, illuminating the stormy scene, and for a moment everything seemed clearer. The man spoke calmly but firmly, making sure she knew what to do. She followed his instructions perfectly, her fear balanced by determination and the sense of purpose. As the man helped her father out of the car, she held the phone close, continuing to describe everything, ensuring the path was clear. The father's breathing grew steadier and she felt a glimmer of hope. The storm raged around them, but in that moment there was a connection, a team working together against the chaos. The girl realized how important her role had been, and a small sense of pride mixed with relief filled her heart. The man guided them both toward safety, ensuring they avoided the deeper water and scattered debris. She followed his instructions carefully, keeping her father calm, speaking softly, and encouraging him to move slowly and carefully. The storm was still fierce, but they were no longer trapped. Each careful step brought them closer to safety. Each instruction followed, bringing a sense of relief. Once they reached a safer spot, the man stayed with them, speaking gently to calm the little girl and her father. He instructed her to stay with her father, to keep him talking, and to continue describing any immediate dangers. She followed him, keeping the phone close, her heart still racing, but now with a growing sense of security. Emergency responders finally arrived, guided by the man's earlier calls and the girl's descriptions. They moved quickly, assessing the father's condition and ensuring both of them were safe. The little girl stayed close, clutching her father's hand, her voice steady as she answered questions and followed instructions. The man stepped back slightly, satisfied that they were in capable hands. She watched as the responders helped her father, providing medical attention, and felt a sense of relief she had never known. The man spoke softly to her one last time, praising her bravery and careful observation. "You did an amazing job," he said. "You kept him safe until help arrived." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of relief, of gratitude, and of pride. The storm continued to rage, but the immediate danger had passed. She stayed close to her father, holding his hand, feeling his pulse grow stronger and more steady. The man, now soaked and exhausted, watched for a moment before finally heading back to his vehicle. His mission was complete, and he had saved 2 lives tonight. The little girl realized that even in the darkest, most terrifying moments, courage and calm could make all the difference. She whispered to her father, telling him that someone had come to help, that they were going to be okay. The emergency responders nodded and reassured her, guiding them both to safety. The man disappeared into the storm, but his voice and his presence remained with her in spirit. She had faced fear, taken charge, and helped keep her father alive. In the middle of the storm, she had found strength she didn't know she had, guided by the voice of a stranger who refused to give up. The storm had finally begun to calm, leaving behind the smell of wet earth and the soft dripping of water from the trees. The little girl sat beside her father in the ambulance, holding his hand tightly. Her fingers were still cold and her hair stuck to her forehead, but she felt a sense of relief that she had never known before. Her father's breathing had grown stronger, and the emergency responders were working quickly to ensure he was stable. She kept talking softly to him, telling him to stay awake, to keep breathing, and to hold on just a little longer. She thought about the man who had stayed on the line with her, guiding her through every step of the storm. She wondered who he was, and she wanted to thank him for keeping her calm and focused. The thought of his voice, steady and reassuring, gave her courage even now. She knew that without him, they might not have made it through the night. The paramedics moved efficiently, checking vital signs, placing her father on a stretcher, and preparing to take him to the hospital. The little girl walked alongside them, still holding the phone in one hand, instinctively wanting to stay connected to the lifeline that had guided them. She repeated instructions, answered questions, and followed every direction without hesitation. Her small voice was steady, her eyes alert, her presence calm despite the chaos around her. As they reached the hospital, the little girl's thoughts turned to what had happened, how quickly everything had changed. One moment they were trapped in the car during the storm, her father unconscious, and the next someone miles away had been guiding them to safety. She realized how important it was to stay calm and follow instructions in emergencies. She also realized that courage could come from the smallest person, in the most frightening circumstances. The medical staff quickly took her father inside, and she followed, staying close and attentive. She gave every detail she could about the night's events, describing the storm, the fallen branches, and the steps she had taken to keep him safe. The staff listened, impressed by her composure and determination. Even though she was a child, she had acted with bravery and intelligence far beyond her years. Once her father was settled into a room and receiving care, she sat by his side holding his hand, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and relief. The storm outside had passed, but the memory of it remained vivid in her mind. She thought about the fear, the tension and the uncertainty, and she realized how much she had grown in just one night. She had faced the worst and she had survived, guided by a voice she had never met in person. She wondered about the man again, and she felt a deep sense of gratitude. His presence, even over the phone, had given her hope and direction. She thought about how he had stayed patient, calm, and determined while guiding her through the storm. His voice had been a beacon, helping her navigate the darkness, and she knew she would never forget it. She wanted to thank him properly, to let him know that he had made a real difference in their lives. The hours passed, and her father began to recover, responding more clearly to her presence. She helped him sit up slightly, encouraged him to drink water, and whispered comforting words. The medical staff checked in periodically, ensuring that everything was improving. Each small sign of recovery gave her more hope and strengthened her determination to stay strong. Later that evening, the little girl received a visitor at the hospital. It was the man who had guided them through the storm. He had driven to the hospital after ensuring that emergency services were in place and that the father was stable. Seeing him in person was overwhelming. He was still soaked from the storm, his clothes damp, but his expression was calm and reassuring. He knelt beside her and smiled. "You did an amazing job tonight," he said softly. "You kept him safe until help arrived. You were brave and smart, and you did everything perfectly." Her eyes filled with tears, and she squeezed his hand tightly. "I couldn't have done it without you," she whispered. "You stayed with me the whole time." He shook his head gently, smiling. "No, it was you who stayed strong. I just guided you. You did everything right." The father, now sitting up and more alert, joined them. He looked at the man with deep gratitude, words failing him at first. He finally spoke, voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for saving our lives. I don't know how we can ever repay you." The man waved his hand lightly, shrugging modestly. "I'm just glad you're safe. That's enough for me." The little girl stayed close to her father, still holding his hand, feeling safe in a way she hadn't felt since the storm began. She realized that courage wasn't about never being scared. It was about staying calm and taking action even when you were scared. She had learned that firsthand, guided by a stranger's kindness and her own determination. In the following days, the story of the little girl who had reached an emergency number and found an unexpected hero spread throughout the community. People were inspired by her bravery and by the man's commitment to helping a child in need. Local news outlets covered the story, highlighting the courage of a child who had taken responsibility in a crisis and the empathy of a man who answered a call for help, even when it was not his duty. The man and the little girl kept in touch, their bond strengthened by the night's events. He shared advice about staying safe and helping others, while she told him about her father's recovery and her own reflections on the experience. They had formed a connection that went beyond the storm, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, people could come together and make a difference. The little girl also began to speak more openly about her experience, helping others understand the importance of calm, clear thinking, and courage during emergencies. She shared her story at school, with friends and with neighbors, emphasizing how staying focused and following instructions could save lives. She became a small symbol of resilience in her community, admired not just for her bravery, but for her calm and thoughtful actions. As the father recovered fully, he often reflected on the night when his life had been in the hands of his child and a stranger, who answered a wrong number. He knew that the world had shown him the power of kindness and bravery in unexpected places. The little girl had grown through the experience, learning that even in fear there could be hope, and that sometimes help came from the most unexpected sources. The man continued his work, but he never forgot the night of the storm, the little girl's voice, and the trust she had placed in him. The experience stayed with him, a reminder of how small actions could have life-saving consequences, and how courage and guidance could come together to overcome even the most terrifying situations. In the quiet moments after the storm, the little girl held her father's hand, thinking about the journey they had endured. She understood the value of calm patience and courage, She knew that even a small voice, speaking clearly and with determination, could make a world of difference. And in her heart, she carried the memory of a stranger's kindness, a guiding voice that had led them through the storm and into safety, forever changing her understanding of bravery, hope, and human connection. Days passed after the storm, and the little girl and her father were slowly returning to a sense of normalcy. The house still smelled of rain and damp earth, and puddles remained in the yard, but the worst had passed. The father's recovery continued steadily, and he was able to walk short distances without assistance. The little girl stayed close, making sure he rested properly and helping him with small tasks. Even in these ordinary moments, the memory of that night lingered, reminding her of the courage and quick thinking that had kept them alive. She often thought about the man who had answered the phone that night. His voice had been calm and patient, giving her the guidance she needed when everything seemed hopeless. She realized that people she didn't know could make the biggest difference in her life, simply by choosing to care and act. That understanding gave her a newfound sense of empathy, an awareness that helping others was one of the most important things a person could do. At school, she shared the story carefully, emphasizing the lessons she had learned rather than the fear she had felt. She spoke about staying calm, paying attention to details and taking action even when she was scared. Her teachers and classmates listened, amazed at the composure she had shown at such a young age. They were inspired by her bravery, and she felt proud, not because of the danger she had faced, but because of the choices she had made to help her father and follow the man's guidance. Her father, too, reflected on the events. He could not stop thinking about the tiny hands holding his own, guiding him and keeping him alive. He often repeated to himself how lucky they were to have connected with a stranger who would not hesitate to help. The father felt a deep gratitude, not just for the man who saved them, but for the little girl who had kept her composure and followed instructions. He knew he owed his life to her courage and determination. The man himself reached out in the days following the storm. He wanted to ensure that the little girl and her father were recovering well. He visited them quietly, bringing a small gift to acknowledge the girl's bravery. She was shy at first, overwhelmed by seeing the person who had guided them through the worst night of their lives. He smiled warmly and spoke gently, praising her calmness, focus, and courage. The conversation was simple but meaningful, reinforcing the bond formed during the storm. The little girl's parents decided to help her process the experience. They encouraged her to express her thoughts and feelings about what had happened, ensuring she understood that bravery also meant taking care of her own emotions after a traumatic event. She learned to balance the pride she felt with the reality of what had occurred, understanding that she had done something remarkable, but also that it was okay to feel scared or overwhelmed. Meanwhile, the community around them began to take notice. People talked about the little girl who had called for help, and the stranger who had answered, showing that heroism could exist in unexpected ways. Local authorities and organizations reached out to share her story, highlighting the importance of teaching children how to respond in emergencies. She became a symbol of preparedness, courage, and resilience, inspiring others to pay attention and act wisely in critical moments. The father also became an advocate for safety and emergency preparedness. He shared the lessons he and his daughter had learned, emphasizing the importance of remaining calm and having a plan. He spoke at local gatherings and community meetings, encouraging parents to teach their children basic emergency skills. The little girl accompanied him occasionally, quietly offering her own perspective and demonstrating the value of composure and attention to detail during crises. Over time, the little girl's confidence grew. She no longer felt helpless or fearful in difficult situations. Instead, she remembered the night of the storm and the voice on the other end of the phone, and she carried that sense of courage and responsibility with her. Simple tasks became easier because she trusted herself, knowing that she could stay calm and think clearly even when faced with challenges. Her bond with her father strengthened as well. They spent more time together, appreciating each other's presence and the fragility of life. They shared quiet evenings talking about ordinary things, but beneath the normalcy, there was a deep understanding of what they had survived together. The experience had taught them both to value small moments and to approach life with a mixture of caution, awareness, and gratitude. The man who had helped them also continued to be a quiet influence. He remained a part of their lives, checking in from time to time, offering guidance and sharing lessons about responsibility, empathy, and calm decision-making. His actions reminded them that one person's choice to act with compassion could ripple outward, changing the course of someone else's life completely. One afternoon, the little girl and her father went back to the roadside where the storm had struck. The red car was gone, replaced by memories and lessons that could not be washed away by rain. She looked at the road, imagining the fear and determination she had felt that night. She spoke softly to her father about what she remembered, recounting every detail, every instruction, and every moment of courage. They laughed and reflected together, finding light in the memory of darkness. The father expressed his gratitude again, telling her how proud he was of her. She smiled, understanding that courage was not about never being afraid, but about choosing to act despite fear. She realized that her actions had mattered, that she had made a difference, and that she had the strength to face challenges in the future. The lessons of the storm became a part of her character, shaping her into someone thoughtful, aware, and resilient. In the evenings, she would sometimes take the phone in her hand, imagining the voice of the man who had helped them. She thought about the calm, patient guidance he had offered, and how it had kept her steady when everything else seemed chaotic. She understood that even a single person's patience, empathy, and willingness to help could save lives and give hope in the darkest moments. The storm was now a memory, but its lessons remained. The little girl had grown in courage, awareness, and compassion. Her father had grown in gratitude and advocacy. The man who had answered the call had left a lasting impression on their lives. Together they had experienced a night of fear, determination, and humanity at its finest. It was a story that would stay with them forever, a reminder of the power of calm, courage, and human connection.